I'm going to teach you everything there is to know about tank buses. If you're an Ork player, you need to listen up because you gotta understand how to use these guys. If you're not an Ork player, you gotta listen up because you gotta figure out how to play against these guys because they are amazing units. They're incredible, but not necessarily in the way you think. And they have to be used very specifically. And if you're playing against them, you gotta counter them very specifically or they'll run you through. So these guys are the surprise heroes of the Ork army, and I'm really excited to break them down for you today. I had a really interesting and exciting coaching call with one of my clients who is doing some really big things with Orks, and we were really breaking down all of the intricacies of the tank buses, so I thought I would bring this and share this with you guys. These nerds have a place in literally any Ork build out there. Any Ork build you can think of, there is a place for the tank buses. They have lots of different roles to fulfill. Believe it or not, they actually are not very good at busting tanks. But I'm going to give you the actual rundown of how I recommend using them. And trust me, it's never going to be in isolation. Meaning one of the worst ways to be utilizing tank busters is to get one unit out and have them, I don't know, shoot. Because it's just not going to do what you want it to do. So I'm going to break down all the math behind tank busters, what they're good into, what they're bad into. I'm going to break down all of the roles that they fulfill and how you can utilize them. I'm also going to give you very specific strategies of how to run them, regardless of which detachment that you're using. So buckle in because this is TankBustas. All right. What detachment likes them the best? Guys, it is every single detachment. Now, they do have different roles based off of what detachment they're in. So if you're running them in, say, Dread Mob or Tactical Brigade, these are going to be some of your primary damage dealers. And the reason for that is when you're running them in Dread Mob, you can give them sustained hits on demand. You can give them extra AP on critical wound rolls, although you're probably not going to give them that. If you're playing them in Tactical, then you're going to be giving them the ability to get that +1 to hit, specifically against infantry units, which is a really big deal. You're going to have the ability to give them 2 +1 to hit modifiers against monsters and vehicles, meaning if you're shooting a tank that pops smoke, they're still hitting them on 4s and not hitting them on 5s, because one of the worst things in existence is to be shooting at a tank and they pop smoke, or God forbid, I'm shooting at an infantry squad with stealth and I'm hitting them on 6s. This is really important for you to understand. So they deal primary damage into your Dread Mob and your Tactical Brigade, but they are an enabler for your Warhorde, Bully Boys, and the Big Hunt. And if you're playing like Cult of Speed, or you're playing, I don't know, what's the other one called? Mordaka? God rest your soul, because those detachments are awful. Anyway, carrying on. Let's talk about the base stats of these guys, and then I'm going to break down their roles for you in a little bit. So here are the base stats. If you are one of those people and you're playing against tank busters because you think they are terrifying and, oh my god, these are overpowered and well, let's just show you what tank busters actually do. I oftentimes, when I'm playing this game, I feel like one of the main reasons why I have tank busters in my army is because my opponents are so irrationally afraid of tank busters that they will just do dumb things on the battlefield because I remind them I have tank busters in my army. The name, interestingly enough, is a little bit misleading. So let's break down exactly how much damage these things actually do. So you're going to deal anywhere between 6 and 9 damage into a Rhino with no cover, or 3 to 6 damage into a Rhino if they do have cover. This is a base tank buster, not activating pulse rockets, and you will always take pulse rockets. Actually, you know what? Let me write that down. Always take pulse rockets, not bonus rockets. With maybe one exception. There's one exception where you might take a bonus rocket, but you're almost always going to take pulse rockets. So when you're not using the pulse rockets, it's going to be 6 to 9 damage into a Rhino with no cover, 3 to 6 with. Now, when you do use the pulse rockets, it's going to be 10.42 damage, and because of the math breaks, that means it's going to be anywhere between 9 and 12 damage without cover, or 8.33 with, meaning it's going to be 6 to 9 if they do have cover. Meaning, if a Rhino's sitting in cover, or if it's not sitting in cover, but it uses Armor of Contempt, a 6-man unit of tank busters does not kill it. Interesting enough. However, the whole point of that is when you look at these guys, they come equipped with 2 squig bombs. They have the grenades keyword, and they also actually have interesting melee opportunities. So if you are getting out, you activate your pulse rockets, you throw your squig bomb. If you hit with it, you're pretty much guaranteed. Then at that point, you should expect to be able to kill a Rhino in one go. If you throw a squig bomb and grenades, you pretty much always guarantee it. So these guys are very good when you start combining resources. They also, interestingly enough, have the ability, and one of the I'll talk about in a little while, is I always equip the knob with the smash hammer instead of the double rocket pistols. So he'll have one rocket pistol, but then I can have the smash hammer so that if I have to charge something in, I can deal the last few wounds on a vehicle or transport if necessary. And I personally have just found that very, very rewarding, and it has worked out really well. I'll talk about more of that in their melee section. Now, one of the other really cool things that TankBustas do for Orks is they actually force your opponent to hide elite infantry. Now, this is one of the funnest things that you can possibly, or most fun, gosh, that was bad English. This is one of the most fun things that you can do when you're playing someone like the Adeptus Custodes. Because previously, if there's a unit of Wardens, they can just kind of stand out in the middle as they're preparing to charge into you during the melee phase. And there's nothing you as an Ork player can really do about a unit of Custodian Wardens who have a 2-up armor save, 4-up invulnerable, are -1 to be wounded, and have a 4-up feel no pain once per game. Now, since TankBusters are very interesting, though, you can disembark TankBusters, throw a squig bomb at the Wardens, where you ask the Wardens, hey, you want to activate your feel no pain in the movement phase? If they say no. If it hits, you're going to deal 1 to 3 damage. 3 damage just kills Warden, which is cool. Then in the shooting phase, you can ask them, hey, do you want to activate your feel no pain in the shooting phase? And what's really fun here is the Wardens actually have to make a real decision about do they want to use the feel no pain. Because on average, you're going to kill 1 to 2 Wardens in shooting. But once you do that, you've neutered that unit, which can, in fact, make the Wardens want to use their feel no pain in the shooting phase, which is good for the Orks because then they won't have a feel no pain in the fight phase when you charge them. And if they don't use the feel no pain in the shooting phase, well, your TankBusters are going to shoot, kill 1 to 2, kill 3 if they spike, which is a big, big deal. So what happens is these bad boys actually are relatively reasonable into elite infantry, and that can cause real big staging problems for your opponents who are used to not really worrying about Orcs shooting all that much. So if I wanted to break the math down here, when you have one squad of TankBusters and you're not using pulse rockets, you're going to kill 2 possessed out of a 10-man. If you use your pulse rockets, because I'm assuming cover, remember, you're going to kill 3. So it actually does matter. Now, then we look at a leader. So if we have a shock attack gun leading them, the stats get a little bit interesting. So what the shock attack gun, Big Mech with shock attack gun does is he's going to give reroll hit rolls of 1s to the unit. Now, I'm going to encourage you to consider thinking about this leader interaction a little bit differently than you might think about other leader actions. Many times, we like to think about the leaders buffing the unit. However, I like to think about TankBusters actually buffing the leader, or the Big Mech with shock attack gun. Because once he attaches to the unit, now suddenly he is also going to be getting the +1 to hit and the +1 to wound against monsters and vehicles, which is a very big deal, and it actually matters quite a bit. So now when you are leading, now I did all of these calculations with pulse rockets just to show you the math on it. Now suddenly when you have a 6-man unit of TankBusters who cost 135 points, and you lead them with a Big Mech with shock attack gun who costs 75 points for a total of, I think that's 210. Sounds like 210. Yeah. When you shoot into a Rhino, you're going to deal, I think the final math is really 9.73 damage with the TankBusters and 7.66 from the shock attack gun. Now, breakpoints are you'd be more closer to the 9 or to the 12 damage. But anyway, this is with re-rolling hit rolls of 1, so the damage does go up a little bit for the whole squad, and you more or less just kill the Rhino. And what's really funny is the Big Mech with shock attack gun also benefits from the pulse rockets, so he will go to strike 10 and AP 5, which is ludicrous and hilarious. If these guys are shooting into an Armiger, you're going to deal 6.48 damage with the TankBusters and 5.83 with the Big Mech with shock attack gun. Now, this almost kills an Armiger, so if you throw a squig bomb or grenades first, you might be able to pick up an Armiger with a shooting. Now, when you actually do the math on that, that's a 210-point unit that is struggling to kill a 140-point unit. It's not necessarily a very good trade. However, in the context of Orks, being able to do that and threaten like a tough walker at range is a big deal. It's a very big deal. Now, when you're shooting into a Vindicator, this is the one that I really want people to understand. TankBusters are not made for busting tanks. Because when you shoot into a Vindicator with your pulse rockets and a leader with re-rolling hit rolls of 1 and all that, you're going to deal 4.3 damage, which would be either 3 or 6 damage, but it's closer to the 3 damage mark. And the reason why I say it like that is because math is a little funky, like with the average damage, but technically you can't deal 4.3 damage with TankBusters because it's only flat damage 3 and there's no feel no pain on the Vindicator, so it would actually be 3 or 6 damage. And when it's 4.37, that means it's below the half arc, so you would generally round that down to 3 damage. But it'll be either 3 or 6, regardless. Now, when you lead them with the big mech with shock attack gun, he's also going to deal another 3.83 damage, which means this squad does not kill a Vindicator. Even with a squig bomb, they don't kill a Vindicator. So you would have to squig bomb and grenades and shoot with your pulse rockets to be able to kill a Vindicator. And that's assuming the Vindicator doesn't pop smoke and the Vindicator doesn't use Armor of Contempt. If they do those things, doo-doo means poop. If they do those things, then the Vindicator does not die to your tank busters. So tank busters suck at busting tanks, but that's okay. It doesn't mean tank busters suck. Contrary, tank busters are actually very good. Now, I want to show you one more calculation here. So if you're playing in Dread Mob specifically, because Dread Mob also likes these bad boys, you can give them sustained hits 1 or lethal hits, or like critical wound rolls can be at +2 AP. So with sustained hits, I just did the math on that one. You're now dealing 8.63, which would be rounded up to 9 damage to the armature. And then the shock attack gun would then deal 7 or 8 damage. So you are killing an armature in Dread Mob. Of course, you're also giving your unit hazardous, which is, but against the Vindicator in Dread Mob, you're getting really close to popping him in one go. So with the squig bomb, you do kill him. You don't necessarily need the grenade strat as well, which is actually very, very nice. So Dread Mob, you definitely deal a little bit more damage. And then, of course, you can use your strats to pump that out really big. So Dread Mob, if you use the strats, it starts getting kind of absurd because you can get rerolls, full rerolls to hit, and then you can give yourself the extra damage, all these things. It gets a little bit wild. But I want to talk a little bit about the actual role of these bad boys. So I'm going to talk about the enabler here, and then I'm going to teach you a cool strategy that you can use with your tank busters. So I call them the enabler for a reason. Because when I'm running tank busters, and I would recommend you do the same, outside of Dread Mob, because that would be a little bit different, because the damage can get a little silly when you run with all those strats. I generally take these guys leaderless. It's not because I think big mechs with shock attack guns are bad. Actually, to the contrary, I think they're quite good. But what I find is that extra 75 points is generally better spent leaning into the other strengths of the Orks. And the strengths of the Orks are really just about having overwhelming amounts of units with crazy melee pressure. What the tank busters do is they enable all of my melee. This is something that I learned as a very, very valuable lesson when I was getting very good results with my Blood Angels. What I found, if I took nothing but jump pack dudes with crazy good melee, I would really struggle because all my opponent really had to do was put a transport full of guys in front of me. And then he was basically safe, where he would put a few battle tanks, and then he would have, 1 or 2 screens, and then I couldn't win the game because there's no way I could reach the things I needed to reach. So what I started doing was implementing shooting into my Blood Angels, and suddenly my Blood Angels started doing really well. Now, with Orks, I basically do the same story, except instead of having tanks to shoot, I have the tank busters to shoot. And the tank busters themselves are really, really amazing in this scenario. So now suddenly when I'm playing my Warhorde full melee carpet army, my opponent can't just put a transport or rhino in the center and say, "What are you going to do about it, nerd?" Well, what I'm going to do about it is I'm going to pop it and I'm going to charge and murder all the things that come out of it. If they want to, say, put one battle tank out there and just say, cool, this battle tank's just going to be picking you apart while I'm behind a screen. Well, I can put out 2 units of tank busters and kill that battle tank, which completely changes the matchup. Even though I'm never going to win a gunline shooting match with them, I am able to enable my melee, and it's a very, very big deal. So the purpose is to stop the opponent from standing out in the open and saying, come at me, bruh. Not to mention, these guys actually follow up with relatively solid melee. So when you look at their profile, they're going to have 15 attacks or 20 in the WA at strength 5 or strength 6 in the WA, which is a really, really big breakpoint. AP 0, damage 1 attacks. If you guys run these into a unit of guardsmen, or you run these guys into 2 squads of Eldar, you'll kill 2 squads of Eldar with their melee. It's actually relatively impressive, the melee output they have for not being a melee unit. Then the leader is always going to take the Smash Hammer, and he'll have 1 rocket pistol. I know a lot of people like 2 rocket pistols, but Smash Hammer and 1 is just, it gives you more utility, so just bear with me on this. That's going to give him an additional 2 or 3 in the WA, strength 6 or 7 in the WA, AP 2, damage 3, anti-vehicle monster attacks. This is critical, that I find, for a lot of times just popping off that last damage that you needed to on a tank. It makes them very interesting. It makes them a multi-phase unit. I've even been able to run in with this guy and got a lucky roll in Warhorde. He rolled 2 6s on the Smash Hammer, and I just popped 2 Terminators with him. It's not necessarily something that you would expect to do, but having the capability of punching up like that is very, very nice. So that is the melee profile that I use these guys. So I always use them. They pop out, they throw their grenade, they throw their squig bomb, they shoot, they charge. I use them in every single phase, and that really gets me the most benefit out of them. And you will find that you're going to get a lot more benefit, assuming that you're using them the same way. So let's talk about a really cool strategy you can do with this. I kind of spoke about this a little bit in yesterday's video, but this is the party bus, or the blasting bus, or the Danny DeVito bus, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, you can build it in one of two ways, and I just kind of want to break it down why this is an interesting strategy. Now, this is a very expensive package. This is like a 380 point minimum package, okay? What you can run is you can run a truck with a mech and 12 tank buses. This is going to be 2 squads. The truck has firing deck 12 on it. That means that you're going to get approximately 60 shots into any 20-man blobs on the table. So if 20-man berserker blobs become a thing, well, that's going to be 60 shots. You're going to be hitting on 4s because the mech will give +1 to hit to the truck, and the truck is the one who's shooting the blast guns, which means you're going to get 30 hits. Now, if you're shooting into a squad of 20 Hormagaunts, you're going to kill slightly over the amount of Hormagaunts in that unit. If you're shooting into a 10-man unit of Possessed, it's going to be 40 shots, meaning you get 20 hits, meaning you're going to kill 6.67 Possessed, which is really going to be 6 or 7 Possessed, right? You can't actually kill 0.67 of Possessed. But anyway, so it's actually very effective against anti-elite infantry and anti-just, hordes when you do it this way. Now, you can also structure it where you took a truck, the mech for the +1 to hit, 6 bustas with a shock attack gun leader, and 5 flash kits. Now, when you do this, the damage output is less, but you do have a little bit more flexibility in the types of units that you can go into. So, for example, now suddenly you're going to be killing 10.4, so 10 or 11 Hormagaunts. The shock attack gun is going to kill 3.5, so it's going to be 3 or 4. And then the flash kits are going to kill 5.56, meaning 5 or 6 Hormagaunts. So it's less Hormagaunts this way, but still relatively effective. Then when you're going into the Possessed, it's actually significantly less because you're going to kill 3.3 with the tank bustas, which is 3, 1.09 with the shock attack gun, which is 1, and then 0.59 with the flash kits. So it's not nearly as effective into the elite infantry, but it is still quite a useful combination, and it still totally works. Now, when you're running 12 tank buses inside a truck, you're actually only going to deal 7.5 damage into a Rhino, which is going to be 6 or 9 damage. It's actually not good into vehicles, even though it's 10d3 shots, because you got to do the math on it. 10d3 shots is 20 shots. You're going to hit 10 times. You're not getting the +1 to wound anymore, which means you're going to get 5 wounds. He's a 3-up in cover, so he's saving on 4s. Like, he's going to save 3 or 4 of them, or he's going to save 2 or 3 of them. Either way, it's going to be 6 or 9 damage. It's not good. So even though it seems like a bunch of good anti-tank, it's not. However, it is amazing for clearing these hordes at range, which most people would never expect orcs to be able to do. So it is a very good strategy to have in your back pocket. It is quite expensive, though. But when you can follow it up with another turn, with a turn later, where now your tank buses disembark, throw their squig bombs, then they get to shoot and then charge, it becomes actually a very spicy thing. So, guys, here are the takeaways about the tank buses. The shooting actually is quite lackluster for the cost. So if you're playing against tank buses, what I want you to understand is you should probably not respect them as much as you are respecting them. 2 units of tank buses is a very different thing than 1 unit of tank buses. In coordination, they can start bringing things down. But do not be surprised that if you have a Vindicator and you pop smoke on it, that someone just shoots 3 squads of tank buses and deals 6 damage to you. Don't be surprised when that happens, because that will happen. Now, when you look at the cost of the tank buster, for 135 points, other armies would probably not take tank busters with a large amount of regularity. And the reason why I say this is they hit on 5s, meaning if they're shooting anything with stealth, they're hitting on 6s. Specifically, if they're shooting a vehicle, they get the +1 and +1 to wound, which is relatively nice, but the strength is still relatively low. Strength 9, going up to strength 10 once per game. The AP is relatively meh, it's okay. AP2 goes up to AP3 once per game, but the damage is also only damage 3. So they're not actually very good at destroying the tanks that they are named after. What they are great for is threatening to annihilate your elite infantry and threatening to annihilate your transports. Now, when used in coordination and in multi-phases, the tank busters really start to shine because they do damage in the movement phase with their squig bomb. They do damage in the shooting phase between grenades and shooting all their guns. And they also do very solid melee damage against specific units. You would, of course, not run them in to charge Angron, but you would run them in to charge cultists for sure. And they can actually take away a lot of the role of some of the other units in your army that you may have. So it's about unlocking the multi-phase potentiality of them. And when you're playing against them, it's about recognizing that their actual shooting really is not as scary as you might think it is. So they are a hybrid unit. They deal anti-transport, charge melee, kill them, or you can run them as a murder, infantry, and party bus. Lots of different ways to run them. Let me know your favorite ways to run them. You can run them in Dread Mob. You can run them in Tactical. You can run them in Warhorde. You can run them in Bully Boys. I run them in Warhorde. I'm taking 3 squads on land. I love them. Run it. Have a great time. Guys, until next one, this was it for today. Crump on. Bye-bye.